What's good, YouTube? Welcome to episode 2 of Kerbal Space Program tutorial mode. In this episode, we're going to go ahead and get into orbit and get ready to go to the moon. And in order to do that, we're going to have to concentrate on getting as much science as possible on our next mission. So this episode is going to comprise of an entire mission of just getting to orbit and getting as much science as physically possible. So we're going to click here on the vehicle assembly building, and we're just going to drop this whole lower stage thing that we have going here. Now we're going to go ahead and do something slightly different here. We only want to bring back our command pod. So what we're going to do is we're going to go for coupling, and we're going to do a decoupler here, and what this does is it'll drop everything below the command pod off, and you control the command pod from then on. So that's perfectly acceptable. So all we're bringing back now with this staging is going to be the command pod and the parachute. Perfect. That's what we're looking for. Now we're going to go through and we're going to look at our fuel tanks here, and we actually have two new fuel tanks. We've got a small fuel tank and a larger fuel tank. Well, right now we need the largest fuel tank we can get, and we're going to need a few of them. So we're going to place that down, and in order to copy and replicate what we have here, I'm going to hold down the Alt key and click down on the part, and it basically copies that part. What's cool about that though is if we choose, instead of choosing the bottom one and we choose the one above it, it actually copies the whole thing, which is good, makes things easier. So let's see, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, we're gonna need a few more than that. I think let's start with 8 and see where we sit on our delta V. Delta V readout is right here. Right now it's showing us 0 delta V because we don't have an engine. Okay, that's perfectly acceptable. We know that we need to add an engine. And we're going to go, instead of the swivel liquid fuel engine, the swivel liquid fuel engine is not as efficient as the Reliant engine. And we're going to need all the efficiency we can get right now. Now, the swivel is great because it helps you fly easier, but we're not going to worry about that right now because I'll be teaching you how to fly a little bit better. So we're going to not use the swivel because it's not as efficient. So if you see, if we click this, we're going to have a problem here. We're going to have 1.1 or 1.49 thrust to weight ratio, which basically means how much thrust versus the weight, which isn't that bad actually. You want to aim for about 1.25 before it's over with, but we've only got 2,926 meters per second of delta V. It's going to take over 3,000 to get to orbit. So if we take that off and we take 2 more of these and we add to it, remember how much we had. Now we've only got 3,195 and a thrust to weight ratio of 125. This is technically enough to get us to orbit, but the thing is, it's going to be super hard to get to orbit with just that. So what we're going to do, we can't make any mistakes whatsoever. So what we're going to do is we're going to get rid of this one, and we're going to go for the Reliant, which is going to be a lot easier. And as you see, it boosts us up to 3,519 with the same amount of fuel because it's a more efficient engine, especially in atmosphere. Every engine has a different efficiency at sea level versus atmosphere or outside of atmosphere. If you look, we're going to right click here on the Reliant fuel engine here, and it's going to lock this into place. So we can look at the thrust here. The thrust at sea level, that's what the ASL means, is 205 kilonewtons. And the thrust in vacuum is 240 kilonewtons. This is actually really good in space compared to what it is at sea level. But it's a lot better than this one is. So we're going to go ahead and use that one anyway. Now that we've got our engine figured out, we're going to need to worry about keeping our tall rocket here from flipping over as we're flying it. And the way that you do that is we're going to go down to aerodynamics, we're going to grab basic fin, and we're going to go with 3 times symmetry. You can do 4, it looks better if you ask me, but the 3 is the minimum that you're going to need. That way, no matter if you look down on top of it, no matter which way it goes, the air is going to be pushing against one of these fins, and it's going to keep it more stable. Basically, it's going to keep it from trying to make jerky movements in places. And the pilot will have more control, which is what we need. Now we can add more fuel here, but we're getting to the point, see we're at 1.55 thrust to weight ratio right now. If you take this off and say add 2 more of these and then put this back on, we're now at 1.33. As long as we're over 3200 delta V here, that's all we really need for this. And we don't want to waste a lot of fuel. There's no point in carrying any more than you absolutely have to here. Now, we can, with 3,503, the reason we want to go lower here is because it's going to be harder to control a taller ship, so you're going to get less efficient burns, and you're going to end up wasting fuel. So you want to get kind of as close to, I'd say about 3,300 as you want to for your first trip to orbit. This will be plenty right here. And don't forget, we're going to have to add some science as well. We're going to go with 2 of these science units because we're going to need 1 for upper atmosphere, and then we're going to need 1 for when we're in space. Now, I would say normally we would want another one for landing, but we're only going to be bringing back command pods, so we don't need that one either. So we're just going to bring 2 of these right here. Okay, so that's perfectly fine. We're going to drop these off, so don't forget to grab them as you take them. Obviously, we're going to need 2 thermometers as well. I'm just going to place these up on here. That way they're easy to get to. And we're going to need 2 of these. We're going to take a lot more than 2 measurements here, but we only need 2 because we can reset these each time. And the only time that we're not going to be able to reset them is when we're actually in the atmosphere, because if we take an EVA, it's going to throw our Kerbal off and he'll die. So what we're going to do is basically just run 2 of these right here. That way we can take the 2 in the atmosphere as we go up that we need, and then reset them and use them from there. So that's the minimum science that we need to run if we want to pretty much take everything that we want to. Now what we could do is put another one of these goo containment units on here, but we're going to go with as little as possible because we're going to be coming in hot. We don't have any kind of heat reduction, but we could run 3 of them by just basically taking this and going with 3. But then we're going to have problems with an EVA. If you look at that, it's actually blocking the hatch, and we're going to have problems with the EVA there. So that's why we're not really going to run 3. We can deal with not having the science at the moment if we are just trying to be more efficient. We can always get that science later. So we're going to go ahead and run this. And this is actually going to be our first orbital ship. We can make it to orbit with this barely. So we're going to have to be very careful. This is technically an SSTO, but we're dropping part of it for return. This is basically the holy grail of rocketry at the moment. Having an SSTO that you can make it into space and in orbit. It gets really, really complicated, and we're not going to go into all of that now, but we're going to go ahead and hit launch. And before we take off, we need to actually, even though we've already done a lot of science here, we haven't logged the temperature. So we're going to log the temperature here, and then we're going to hop back out on an EVA, and we are going to take the data here. Now we've gotten every bit of science that we can here now with what we currently have. So we're just going to hop back in. And now, as you see, since we took the data, we can now log temperature again, which is good. So we're going to go ahead and just pin this here with a 2 hot thermometer. We're going to pin both of them because we're going to take 2 different readings here. We're going to take one in the lower atmosphere and one in the upper atmosphere. We're also going to take this mystery goo containment unit, and we're going to pin that as well so we can grab it from the upper atmosphere, which is where we need to take it from. And we're going to take and pin the command pod as well over here. That way we can take a crew report when we hit the upper atmosphere. For some reason, actually we only need 1 of these now that I think about it. For some reason it counts the upper atmosphere and lower atmosphere as the same thing, or mid atmosphere and lower atmosphere. So you only need 1 reading until you get to this dark blue section here, this super dark blue. That's when you want to take your second reading. So this is all we actually need. We don't need the second thermometer now that I think about it, but that's perfectly acceptable. We're going to go ahead and toggle SAS like before. Now the way we're going to take off to get to orbit, we have to do what's called a gravity turn. You don't want to fight. Basically, getting to space is easy. You can go straight up and get to space, no problem. If we're just trying to escape the atmosphere, we could do that. But we're going to come back down really, really quickly, and we don't want that because we're not going to have enough atmosphere to slow us down, and it's basically going to kill poor Jebediah Kerman here. We don't want that to happen. So we're going to do what's called a gravity turn. We're going to fly straight up until we're somewhere between 50 to 100 meters per second. And then we're going to start leaning over towards 45 degrees. What we're doing is we're minimizing the amount of time that we're burning in the atmosphere by doing this. There's a lot of science and a lot of math behind that. So we're not going to get into the whole thing now, but just know that the easiest way to get out of the atmosphere is once you're doing about 100 meters per second, you want to get to around a 45 degree tilt, somewhere between 10,000 meters and 15,000 meters, and then just keep going horizontally as much as possible. So what we need to do to get to orbit is we need to build up enough orbital speed, basically horizontal speed, to keep falling and missing the planet. So we're going to go ahead and hit the space bar to take off. Remember what we said about that, and I'm going to grab some mystery goo when we get in the air, and I'm also going to log the temperature when we get in the air. We're going to fly until we hit about 70,000 apoapsis here, which if you click this little purple maneuver node, you can actually pay attention to what's going on there. This is going to reset when we take off, but we want to get to about 70,000 and then cut the engines. Now the way we increase and decrease our throttle here is we can hit the Z key or Z key, it's according to where you're from, and that will go to full throttle. If you hit the X key, it will go to no throttle. If you hold down the Shift key, it'll increase your throttle slowly, and if you hold down the Control key, it'll decrease it slowly. So we're going to hit the Z key and go ahead and go to full throttle. When we take off, that's going to help us. So all we have to do now is take off, and then we're going to cut the throttle with the X key once we hit about 70,000 apoapsis. Don't worry about what it's reading now. That's just because we're sitting here. It's not actually correct. So as soon as we take off, that's going to reset. Now remember, we need mystery goo and temperature while we're in flight, and then a crew report as well once we get this to the upper atmosphere. All right, so we're going to hit the space bar here and take off. Now we're watching our surface speed here, and as soon as we get to about 50 to 100, somewhere around there, we're going to actually start leaning over to the right by using the D key. And we're pretty much going to have to hold it down for the most part, but you do want to stay within this circle here. Don't go outside of that circle, because then you're going to become unstable and you're going to have too much air pushing you and you're going to flip. But we're just holding it down. We're going to go ahead and observe mystery goo here, which looks like we already have one of those. So we're going to reset that just to... No, we're going to go ahead and save that. And then we're going to log our temperature as well. Okay, good. Now we can just move on until we hit about 70,000 on our apoapsis. As you see, I'm constantly holding down the key right now. That's the good thing about those fins, that sets us about right. Now, we're not exactly getting perfect gravity turn here, but it's good enough. It's going to save us a lot of fuel this way. And we're just waiting for our apoapsis here to hit 70,000, and as soon as it hits over 70K, which is out of the atmosphere, we'll go ahead and cancel our throttle. Okay, we're good to go. Now I'm going to go ahead and take a crew report here since we're in the upper atmosphere, and we can EVA since we're in the upper atmosphere. We're going to go ahead and do that and grab all of our data out of here. So let's take data, collect data, right click on him, do an EVA report, and take the data out of here, drop back in. Now that we're back in, we're going to turn on SAS so we don't go spinning out of control here. And we're going to start lining up with the horizon here on our little nav ball. And we're going to start thinking about what we have to do to get into orbit. If you hit the M key here, you can actually right click on the AP, which is apoapsis. That means the highest point in orbit. And you see it's a little bit short, so we need to actually give some more throttle. So I'm just going to slowly increase the throttle until we're over 70,000. That way we don't get out. Okay, that way we're out of the atmosphere. And as you see, it's not really moving forward. The apoapsis sitting. That's good. That's actually what you're looking for. We're just going to keep firing in this direction until we reach orbit. And that's really how you do it. You want to get kind of close to your apoapsis here, and then you want to fire into it. But if it starts going away from you, slow down. Try to keep it as close to the same distance in front of you at all times as possible. If it starts going away from you too quickly, that means you're either firing too early or too hard. We want to keep it as low as possible. That way we don't have to waste a lot of fuel to get into orbit. And as you see, this trajectory is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. We basically just have to get the trajectory to where, okay, we need to slow down here. It started moving away from us too quickly. So if we cut our throttle, we can actually get a more efficient burn as we get closer to the apoapsis here. That's called the Oberth Effect, by the way. We'll cover that in depth in this series. Okay, so we're going to go ahead. It's going to go ahead and move away from us at this point because, as you see, we're almost in orbit. We're just going to slowly burn until we get into orbit. This is the safest way to do it. There we go, and we are about to hit orbit. What we want is we want this periapsis here to hit about 70,000, and then we're going to hit the X key to cancel our thrust as soon as it hits 70,000. Okay, we're going to cancel now, and we're going to use the Oberth Effect to bring us into orbit. So what we're going to do, because our apoapsis is getting too far away from us, what we're going to do is we're going to just time warp by hitting the period key here until we get closer to the apoapsis and be ready to use the comma key to slow us down. Be sure not to go too quickly when you do this, or else you'll fly right past where you want to be. So we're just going to get closer to the apoapsis. We don't have to be exactly on it. We're running low on fuel here. So we've got to be very careful with how we spend it, because we're still going to need fuel to get back from orbit. All right, there we go. Now we're going to find, if you look here, this is what's called the Retrograde Node. If you fire into this, it's going to slow you down. If you fire into the one that doesn't have the X in it, which should be directly on the other side here. So we're just going to spin around until we find the one with no X. It's the one that we've been looking at so far with the circle. This is called prograde. If you fire into that, it speeds you up. So what we're going to do is we're just going to place our reticule right in the center of it, and then we're going to slowly increase. And there, we are now in orbit. As you see, we have this milestone thing over here yelling at us. You can read through all of these if you want to, but we've just completed all of our contracts. We are in orbit, and we have very little fuel, but we have enough fuel, which is 289 meters per second, to actually come out of orbit. I'm going to go ahead and just speed up here to get to the light side of the planet for you guys so you can see what's going on. And then we're going to start doing our science that we need to do. Okay, so now that we're in orbit, we're going to go ahead and take a crew report. Keep that. We're going to close down that one, and we're going to log the temperature as well. Okay, we're going to keep that experiment, and then we're going to take another mystery goo and keep that. And we're going to get out and do an EVA, and we're going to take the EVA report here, keep experiment, and we're going to grab this data as well so we can actually reset our crew report. Now, if you notice, when we hit EVA report here on this guy, it says just above Kerbin's water. Well, that's a biome. So you can actually take a different EVA report from any different biome that you want. So the trick here is, while we're over the light side, we're going to go ahead and get back in real quick so we can speed this up. But while you're over the light side, you can actually take a crew report. You can actually take an EVA report here from pretty much anywhere you want to. So once we get over the land, we can take a EVA report and get a different biome. We're going to take that for as many as we can possibly find. We're going to try to get every biome that we can. So we're just going to speed up here to get to the mountains that you see here. So as soon as we get over that, we'll slow down. All right, we're going to go ahead and slow down. And as you see, we're pretty much over the mountains here. So we're going to hop out and do an EVA report. It's still over the water, so we're going to wait a second until we get over it. Just basically keep trying until you find the right one and just hit save otherwise, or save then. Okay, so Kerbal Shores here. We're going to go ahead and take that experiment. We're going to pop back in and then pop back out as well, because we should be able to get one over the mountains if we're quick enough. Yes, we did. And we're going to keep that experiment as well. Now we're going to wait until we get over the grasslands here. And we're going to take another EVA report. So hop in so we can save that one. And then hop back out and wait until we get over the grasslands here. Looks like we'll be able to take grasslands, highlands, and desert through here. So just keep an eye on it, and as you get over a new biome. Yes, highlands. So we're going to keep that. And then pop back in. Just do this basically and try to get as many different biomes as you can on your first trip. This is going to give us a lot of science, so we should be able to make it to the moon on the next mission. I'm going to go ahead and just grab a bunch of EVA reports on our first route, and I'll catch back up with you when we're ready to come back down. Okay, so it looks like we got all the science that we're going to get off of that. I went ahead and got, let's see, review stored data here. I got an EVA report from the deserts. I got the water. I got Kerbal's upper atmosphere and shores, mountains, highlands, grasslands, and that's it. So we got plenty of science off of that, which is good, and it's about time for us to start thinking about sending old boy home, because without that we can't keep our science, because we didn't set a way to send the science back. So what we're going to do, if you remember, I talked about the Oberth Effect here before. Now what the Oberth Effect basically says is the highest point or lowest point of an orbit is the best time to make a burn if you want to be efficient about it. And as you see, we've only got 289 meters per second of fuel left. Our periapsis is currently at 73,000 meters. We're going to need to lower this periapsis to where it's at least below the atmosphere in order to slow us down enough to land. Now, we're going to try to get it to about 30,000 meters if we possibly can. So we're going to have to wait until we get to the apoapsis to burn retrograde to make sure that we can lower our periapsis the most efficiently. So we're going to wait until we get around there. So we're going to go ahead and just use time warp. Remember, this does not take physics into account during time warp. Physics warp does, time warp does not. So be very careful not to overshoot. Use your comma button to slow you down as you approach your apoapsis. We don't have to be exactly on our apoapsis, but it helps to be as close as possible here. So we're just going to get kind of close to it here, and then we're going to start slowing down even more. All right, that should be pretty good. And we're going to line up with our retrograde node here so we can slow ourselves down. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the F5 key for a quick save while we're doing this. That way, if we make any mistakes, all we have to do is hit F9 and we can come back. I recommend when you're a new player, absolutely be very liberal with the use of that. Okay, so we're at our apoapsis now. We're going to just start firing slowly here, and we're going to watch our periapsis and get it down as close to 30K as possible. We don't want to go too far past it. In fact, 33K is perfectly acceptable for your first entry. We've got plenty of fuel left here, but we don't necessarily need all this weight. This weight's going to do nothing but speed us up when we come back through. So we're going to go ahead and hit the space bar once we grab all of our data real quick. We're going to hop out and make sure that we've grabbed all of our data out of here. So that one is empty, and that one we need to collect the data. We also want to just collect all data from here just in case. We're going to log temperature. We're going to take our data here. Okay, so just to be sure, just in case that burns up on re-entry. and we're going to go ahead and hop back in. Now, I'm going to go ahead and log temperature. I'm not sure if we got, no, we didn't, not high over Kerbal. So we're going to grab that experiment. We're going to do another EVA. We're going to take another EVA report because we're high over Kerbal. And then we're going to hop back in, do a crew report as well. High over Kerbal. It's another biome, so that's more science we can get. And then we're going to hop back out as usual to grab all of that. And we are actually going to re-enter the atmosphere shortly. So we might as well, since we got all of our data, let's make absolutely sure we grabbed all the data. Okay, so we've got one more here. So I'm going to EVA and I'm going to take the data off of that and hop back in. Okay, we're good to go. Now all we have to do is hit the space bar. And we've separated. Now this is just going to burn up in the atmosphere. There's no worry about that. We're on a deorbit trajectory, so that's just going to burn up in the atmosphere. Now what we want to do is, if you notice, it's really hard to control right now. And we're going to need some decent control here. So we're going to right click on the crew hatch, and you see this wheel authority here. We're going to just crank it on down to about 14% or so. And we're going to hit SAS. So he can easily maneuver. And we're just going to maneuver over to where we're facing the retrograde. What that's going to do is that's going to allow the butt end of our capsule here to lean directly into the atmosphere. And we're going to have to adjust it as we go and try to stay as retrograde as possible when we get into the atmosphere, keep us from flipping out of control. So we're just going to speed up here. It's going to spin around and it's going to put us on prograde, but we can fix that once we get slowed down. Now, when we hit 70,000 meters, as you see, it adjusts your time warp. So it's going to slow us down to 1. Okay, so we're at 1 now, and now we can just go on and line up retrograde. Make sure you have your SAS on for this because he's going to keep you pretty solid here. And I'm just going to spin around to where Jeb can see outside. So I'm just going to line him up just like that with the horizon. That way he can see the sun through the window, make him happier. And we're just going to sit here and ride through on this. I'm not going to speed anything up, but I will speed it up on the video. Basically, we're just going to keep ourselves facing retrograde with very, very small movements as we go. Try not to overdo it, which is why we needed to reduce the amount of wheel power that we had. But watch your temperature gauges here, and if anything gets too red, then you may want to spin a little bit, but I doubt we'll have to do that with this setup because we don't have anything sticking out. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to get down to about around 2,000 meters per second before these go completely red, which we should be able to do. It shouldn't be much of an issue. That's why we actually chose the altitude that we chose. But we're going to be slowed down, and we're going to have these heating effects from the atmosphere turning into plasma here. And yeah, that always happens whenever we hit in if we're too close on view. And we're getting a little bit hot here. So be very, very watchful over this. This is why we decided to hit the F5 button earlier to save, just in case we were going too steep. But we should be okay. We're starting to get to the point to where we're going to have less heating effects here. We did lose, see, this is exactly why we took our data out of our thermometers here. We just lost the thermometers because they got too hot. But you see this middle one, that's your crew, or that's your command pod, so there's no worries. And we're just basically going to keep in line here with the little X on the retrograde and continue to go down. I'll go ahead and speed it up until we're done with the heating effects. Okay, so the heating effects are gone now. We're just going to ride this out until we get to where we can use our parachute here. Notice it's red around the border for the parachute, and that basically means if you pop your parachute now, it's just going to break. You're moving too quickly. So you need to wait until you slow down enough until that goes clear again. It'll go yellow and then it'll go clear. Yellow basically means you can use it and it might break, like right here. And now we're clear again. So now that it's clear, we're just going to hit the space bar and go ahead and use our parachute as high up as we can. And once we hit about 1,000 meters here, we're gonna get to where the parachute will open up fully, and it should slow us down to about 6 meters per second or so. And we're pretty much safe at this moment, so we can actually hit the period key to speed up to 4 times physics simulation to speed us up until we get to the ground. And at 1,000 meters, it'll pop open, so don't stress too much. There we go, and it slows us down to about 6 meters per second, which is perfectly safe for this command pod. It's rated, I believe, for around 12 meters per second. And then once we land, we're just going to come out and do a little bit of extra science because we'll be in a new biome. There we go. We are landed. So we're going to go ahead and take another crew report here. And we are going to hop out for an EVA. We have to slow down, or use the comma key to slow down to 1 time acceleration, and then we're going to hop out for an EVA. We're going to take that data, and then we're going to do another EVA report. All right, so now that we've done all of that, we can just hop right back in, and we're done with this mission, so we can go ahead and recover vessel. All right, we managed to get 184 science out of that. Good. I don't know if that's going to be enough to get us to the moon, but we'll find out. If not, then the next episode we'll concentrate on getting there. And we got 534 funds from recovered parts. We just lost all the money that we spent for that, which is why we want to get to the point to where we can start recovering our vessels. And as you see, he leveled up to level 1, which is awesome because that means we can now use nodes and have him focus specifically on retrograde and prograde, which is good. Makes things a lot easier for us in the long run. So we're going to go ahead and come in here and we're going to start unlocking some stuff in science before we finish up. Now, one thing we're going to need more science, so we're going to go ahead and research this. We're going to need some advanced rocketry. We're going to need bigger fuel tanks. We're going to need better engines. So we're going to go ahead and open that up as well. We're going to need fuel systems to get this to the moon. So this external fuel duct here is going to be very, very important. What that does is allows us to really increase our fuel efficiency. We'll get into that when we make the vehicle. But we're going to want that piece. So we're going to hit research there. And we've got 34 science left over. So we're going to look through here and see. We're going to want Science Junior as soon as possible, which is something that is not necessary to go to the moon, but we're going to need it before it's over with. And we're going to want the strut connectors soon. We don't need it to go to the moon, but we want them soon enough. When we come back for the next episode, we'll concentrate on getting up enough science to where we can buy this stuff and probably a few more other bits and bobs as well. And then we'll start thinking about going to the moon. Thank you for watching the video all the way through. If you haven't already, please drop a like to let me know that you did. Also, if you're new here, think about hitting the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted when new videos go live. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, click one of the videos on your screen now. Thank you. Have a nice day.